everyone. My name is Candida Rifkind. I'm she, her pronouns, and I'm a professor at the University of Winnipeg, where I research and teach and talk about comics and graphic narratives and novels, or mostly on nonfiction. So I teach and write about comics usually that are autobiographical or biographical or comics journalism. And I taught courses on Canadian comics, Indigenous comics. Some of my former students are here, which is lovely. They've gone on to great success, I might add. And I just finished writing a scholarly book on refugee comics, comics by and about refugees, both print and online, and some serious games that use comics to create the refugee experience for users. So that's where my head has been, and in all of that, I often read queer artists and teach queer artists. And certainly in my teaching, we talk a lot about things like censorship of queer comics, which is growing, not just in the US, but in Canada too. So I'm really excited to have these panelists here today and to hear about their work and how they see the whole world of 2SLGBTQI plus representation in comics now. So I think what we'll do is, and I'm going to kind of piggyback on some of Sonia's questions from the previous panel, but the format is each artist introduces themselves and tells us a little bit about their work, and then we'll have some questions from me for all of them, and then we'll open it up to questions from the floor. So why don't we just go down the table, whoever wants to grab the mic, please introduce yourselves.
I'm on the hot seat. My name's Kielamel Sibal, but you guys can call me Kiela. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a comic book letterer primarily. I started out as a cartoonist, but sort of got into professional comic book lettering. I've done a few books for High Water Press, and there's a few more coming. Right now I have Dreams Volume 1 published, and Between the Pipes, which literally just came out. I've done work for IDW Comics. I did the first few issues of the Monster High series that's ongoing right now, and I've done some webtoons like Rain Family Adventures and Big Apple Energy. Yeah.
My name is Alice RL. My pronouns are they and them. I am a two-spirit, trans, non-binary person. Primarily the work that I do at this point, I did the art for Between the Pipes that came out, as well as I did the coloring for Little Moons that recently came out. Primarily I work digitally, but I also am an art teacher, and I've been doing that for about 20 years now.
Hi, I'm Scott B. Henderson, he, him. I've been illustrating since I was like 3, but I've been published stuff primarily with High Water Press for the last 15 years. That started with 7 Generations. And most recently, the latest superhero graphic novel, Indigenous Superheroes graphic novel, written by David Robertson and illustrated by myself. The Record Arises, Volume 3. But I've also done some other books. A couple of years ago, I also did a short story for the Marvel Voices Pride, which involved D-Man being sort of a mentor to 4 new transgender superheroes. And then the Sinister Syndicate busts in and beats up Spider-Man. So.
Okay, thanks. So I think we'll get to kind of how you got started and some of those artistic questions, but I always like to ask artists or people who are involved in comics, what kind of comics they grew up reading and what really shaped them, their ideas of comics when they were younger.
Well, when I was really young, I didn't necessarily read a lot of comic books, but I've always been drawing pictures to stories. So it's probably more like comic strips like Garfield or whatnot, or cartoons, Robin Hood, G.I. Joe, whatever was popular at the time in the 80s mostly, and that sort of thing. I didn't start to regularly start collecting comics until sometime when I was junior high, and I think that was actually Transformers, but then eventually I probably most got into sort of Ghost Rider and Spider-Man, a lot of Marvel titles, that sort of thing. I was really into X-Men for a long while. So that's in the 90s, just before, or late 80s, early 90s, just before the foundation of Image Comics. I am very much, I almost always read comics, graphic novels for the art. I love a great story, don't get me wrong. But it's the art that's usually what makes me come back to it over and over again, so it's falling apart. I will reread a great story again, but it's like months or years in between, whereas Spark I'll always look at and analyze, compare myself to, feel a little bit bad, but then feel better.
I grew up reading Archie comics and Sonic the Hedgehog. A lot of Sonic. But then, like, it was about maybe when I was 12, like, manga was sort of a thing where I was able to, like, I bought, like, how regular comics are now, like, not the graphic novel form, but just issues. Like, I have several issues of just manga comics. And that's really what got me probably into comics, because otherwise I have a hard time reading them sometimes. So, especially, and I personally do not care about superhero comics, which is a large majority of comics.
So like, I think I'm the youngest here, so I mean, I grew up with manga, like from in the beginning. I think, yeah, I was really obsessed with, like, you know, sort of the shoujo style of comics. I mean, I was also obsessed with, like, the shonen, like Naruto, and like Tegami Bachi and stuff like that. But yeah, and like I was obsessed with that, and that was like when I started really drawing comics. You know, I liked imitating, you know, the anime style, the manga style of from those series. But you know, what really got me, you know, into comics, what really convinced me that I could sort of be in the industry was like picking up this volume of Saga when I was 14 at HMV, and like looking at it, and it's just like that was the book I was like, fuck, like, oh, I'm sorry. I was like, yeah, like, I could do this, you know, like, this is what it's all about for me. And just, for me, I think the biggest part, too, was, like, finding out, like, the art. Like, as Scott said, you know, like, what makes us keep coming back is really the art. Like, it's what makes or break a comic. And for me, that art, like, in Saga, like, really just blew me away. And for me, I think the fact that when I found out the artist was Fiona Staples, who was, like, you know, she's half Chinese and she's a woman, you know, that kind of really made me realize, like, yeah, like, I can do that too.
I think we should say a prayer for HMV, the long lost
Yeah.
importage place where you could just wander in and get things that have been mispriced and
Yeah.
cheap. You didn't have to go to a comic book store, right? You have to be part of that kind of community that can be quite cliquey.
It's funny, that's exactly where I picked up the volume in that exact store too.
Yeah. So that kind of accidental discovery.
Yeah.
We're talking about art style, so it seems like maybe we should go there for a minute. So you mentioned the kind of art style you like, but and Scott, you're saying that for you, it's the art style that brings you back again and again. So, like, what do you value in comics art? What do your eyes get drawn to? And what are you trying to do in your work aesthetically? I thought we'd start talking about identity and queer issues, but let's go to aesthetics. What do you really value in your art style? What are you aiming for?
Okay. You know, I think, yeah, there's a difference between what you like to like read and what you like to draw. Because yeah, I also draw my own comics, even though I letter as a living. I think for me, what I look for when it comes to reading, it's like I like every single type of sequential comic. Like I really like walking around. There's abstract sequential form, and then there's obviously more manga inspired, you know, very and the other like comic book style and all that stuff. For me in particular, yeah, like when it comes to reading, I like picking it up because it's just like then it can inform what I want to put down. And for me, I like to think. I mean, I don't really have a big body of work when it comes to my own comics work, but you know, I like doing any kind of style. You know, I've done comics which are almost like, yeah, like it's Mike Mignola. I pretty much looked up for Mike Mignola and just add a bit of screen tone on top and just like, you know, pass it off as my own. And sometimes there's like this comic I'm doing where, you know, I don't know if anyone's read The Human Target, like the new series, like the recent ongoing or limited series by Tom King and Greg Smallwood. And like Greg Smallwood's art there is incredible. It's like this style, like you haven't seen that style before, you know, like in sequential form, it's like mid-century, and it's like, it's not ink, it's pencil, and it's just like, you know, all these different colors. I think sometimes what I look for, it's like, yeah, it's just the gesture, and sometimes it's almost like reading a film. you know, in a sense, but also like, I need to sometimes also look for some clever, you know, play between like, you know, dialogue and like, you know, borders and stuff. But yeah, like for me, I think it's just like anything that sort of captures sort of principles of filmmaking, because, you know, negative space is really important when it comes to panels and stuff like that. The lettering, I think, also like, I feel like for me, like I know art style is like something to keep coming back to, but sometimes it's like, I will put that in a book if the lettering really sucks, right? So like sometimes it's just like, at this point, I guess, you know, the books I pick up, it's like the lettering has to be good, but like, it's funny, because, you know, I'm sort of full of contradictions there. I like experimental books where technically the rules of lettering don't really apply, so, you know. Yeah, I mean, basically my answer is anything, but I think I like when they sort of have that method of like film, you know, the framing, the blocking, all that stuff, but at the same time, you know, experimenting with bordering, it's not just conventional and all that.
Yeah, like I think for me, there's really only two comic like genres that I read, really. Which the first one is like Girls Love or Yuri, that's all I read. Or it'll be like really dark, I'll say animal comics. I'm really into Warrior Cats. And lots of people do fan comics based off of that, which is like, I'm also a big fan of Watership Down and like Dogs and Felidae. So like, it's like I like animals, but I do find the interested, like it's different, or it's interesting to have the different dichotomy of animals usually as a substitute for humans, right? So I really like that. And I would say for the most part, that is what I personally aim to do. For work, you know, I do what the people ask me to do, which is fine with me. That's sort of, I would say that's how I work primarily.
Well, I've always liked a lot of different stuff. Like when I was really getting into comic books, it was like the late 80s, early 90s, Jim Lee, McFarlane, all those sorts of guys, mostly Marvel. And ultimately mostly like North American comics. But over time, I was sort of introduced to other art styles. I do also really like Nola. Or Dave McKean's work, whether it's the Sandman covers or things like his ink work that he did for his own book, Cages, I believe it was. And I really like that, and like Sinkwich, and a lot of very different styles, like some that are realistic and some that are exaggerated, like North American sort of style, or like wood blocks. I only just last year read Akira. I love the art for. I think it's amazing, super influential. So I'll like lots of different styles. Nola to Jim Lee to the Akira comics, and that sort of thing. It's all very different styles, but when it comes to how I like to draw, I lean more towards not necessarily like super realistic, but just stylized realism or kind of North American sort of style, and that sort of thing. Not so much, I'll say, cartoon or exaggerated in that way, or too rustic, but I still like those, or really appreciate those different art styles. I just don't, it's not just the way that I choose to draw or express my own stuff. I was also a little bit more rigid like with my panels, and I do very much also appreciate like the storytelling aspect, and I like looking over things like that. Film studies that I took in university was also really instrumental and important in helping to tell stories, because film and comics have certain similarities, parallels, we'll say. And so that really helped to build the storytelling aspect, which is a whole other thing that comic artists have to learn in addition to perspective and anatomy and everything else.
Great, thanks. So let's get to the topic of the panel, which is 2SLGBTQI plus comics. I'm going to say queer comics for, you know, I think you understand that it is an inclusive and fluid category. So I think you're all here because you fit into that fluid spectrum, and I wonder if we can start by talking about how you see the state of the field of comics today for queer artists, whether from inside as a professional or the representation of queer characters in comics? Like, where are we at today? How can we take stock of where we're at? And if you want to talk about how things have changed or need to change, that's great too. Who wants to jump in first? Are we in a good place right now?
I think we're in a better place. I can definitely I personally, like, I don't buy a lot of comics, but I do, like I mentioned, I like Girls Love Yuri. I collect a lot of Yuri, especially, like, I will buy Japanese volumes, like, whatever. But the amount of availability for, like, English versions of these titles is huge. Like, it is kind of nuts. Because, like, I used to be on, like, LiveJournal, and it would be, like, a daily Yuri thing. So it was, like, I would get a page a day maybe, right? So versus I'm getting, like, fully translated books that I can purchase. Obviously, like, indie comics have been doing it forever. And I'll say they do, I don't want to say they do it better, but they're more willing to go further with their content. Like, in terms of just, I would say, having trans characters just in general, just as not, they're just a character, right? They're not necessarily part of the main story or even, like, influential to the main story. But that's, and I would say, once again, indie comics have always been doing that way better than, like, standard professional publishing.
I would also agree that I think things are a lot better. Like, I didn't come out until in my 40s, so much later. But looking back, yeah, I don't think well, at least not with the books that I was reading, there wasn't a lot of representation. I know also in the 80s and I think even into the 90s, and things like Marvel, they basically had a don't say gay kind of policies and things like that. That's very different now, especially if you read like X-Men, where practically everybody is somewhere on the spectrum there. And that sort of thing. So there is, even in the big publishers, and that there is definitely been a change. And they see a lot more, well, you're seeing just a lot more graphic novels in general for even younger audiences and things like that. And in those books, there is some more queer themes. I picked up on Fluke, Witch Boy, which I love. That was an amazing book. I love that book. I got it for my daughter, but I think I read it just as much as she does. And then there's even other very mainstream books like Heartstopper, which my daughter's also really into. So I think there's a lot more of it there. And it's way more apparent and not like hidden away, secreted away, in a dark corner. You have to go to the back alley to get a copy of it or something like that. And I was more into North American comic books, but my sort of outsider view of manga is that there is generally a lot more variety. North American comic books is predominantly scripts. There's a lot of underground stuff that's also not that. But with manga, you have your superheroes, but then you got things that are about tennis championships and slice of life stories, and just way more variety, and there was room for that sort of stuff. That's getting better in North American as well. I think partially because the manga was getting more popular in North America, but yeah, I mean, those things, sort of things, I think also make a difference too.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree. It's definitely been a lot better. So I think in the last 10 years, definitely. But for me, I think my issue right now is just like, there is better representation, there's more, but not necessarily like, it's almost sometimes like kind of shallow. But like, that's why you really have to seek out like actual queer people who make the art, who make the comics. I mean, more likely to get it in the indie underground, industry than like, with corporate, with DC Comics or like IDW, it's kind of ironic because, Monster High, for example, like there's very much like some queer undertones with that kind of franchise, with that series, but even personally for me, it's just like, it still doesn't go down deep enough. And a big part too is that representation is great in like, in the comics industry, but I feel that the books that are represented, it's still skewing on the younger side. Like I'm still not getting, like at least in the mainstream sense, I keep thinking of the graphic novels that are out now, and I'm 24, so it's just like, I feel like the books that are coming out now, it would have really had an impact on me if they came out 10 years ago or whatever. And now that they're coming out, I just feel so relieved, because then the kids can just read that stuff and they won't feel isolated and stuff. But for me, I couldn't really find myself picking it up, because it's where does it go from there? As a person who just, I'm a lesbian who just happens to be queer. What happens after high school? What happens after college and all that stuff? What happens, when you're in your 20s, your 30s, your 50s? And I know technically we're sort of talking about, actually, I'll track back, but I think that's where I'm coming from. But yeah, it really is, sorry. Yeah, it's in a much better place. I feel like it could be better. I think I was in a panel, I was viewing a panel with E.M. Carroll and Faith Erin Hicks, and Faith Erin Hicks was talking about just the lack of the adult market in the graphic novel space, and I think that's where personally I feel like there's the gap, that I personally feel that should be filled, because we're not gonna be 14, 20 forever, and we're still gonna be trans, we're still gonna be gay, so it's always good to have that to consider when it comes to representation.
That's a really interesting point I hadn't thought of, because when I teach a lot of queer memoirs or graphic memoirs, they're always coming of age.
Yeah.
And they're often focused on leading up to coming out, and the fallout of that. And you don't often see things about life after that. Mm-hmm. And so they tend to be narratives of trauma and then kind of redemption. Mm-hmm. But, slice of life for a 50-year-old queer person, that isn't a kind of story that we're seeing very often. So, I have a lot of questions around that, and also around the way that maybe because so many queer comics focus on young people, there's a kind of moral panic about them right now. Mm-hmm. School boards censoring them, and obviously it's different in different places, but there does seem to be a real anxiety about sexuality in comics in general, and especially queer sexuality. Mm-hmm. But the idea that they tend to be skewed young, which some people would obviously say is a positive, and it is, mm-hmm. There's now creating another gap, especially in terms of adult representation of adult lives, adult queer and trans lives. That's a really interesting point. Alice or Scott, anything on that, or on where we're at in terms of this?
There's a hearing in Inga about elderly lesbians.
When you mention that, it made me think of how, for the longest time, comic books were considered just for kids. It was just superheroes and escapists, and it had no value or substance. But of course, there were, I'll say there's ones that do fit that, but there's books that are much more mature, might still be superheroes or not, but more mature and more heavy subjects. That has also been changing, because now, whether it's rebranding as graphic novels or whatnot, or things like what press has been doing with focusing on education and that sort of thing. So the books are getting, are having those more serious things, but yeah, with the queer community and representation comic books, yeah, it's always, oh, am I coming out? And it's usually young, not necessarily as older folks that come out much later, because we repress it that much longer, or that they're just simply are older, or fallouts of, well, a little bit of that might be also tied with the AIDS epidemic and that sort of thing. So there was a lot of queer men and whatnot that never got to be older, sort of thing, and so that once again it's a market or a topic that could be opened up to, because the representation sometimes started by having you have your gay friend or whatever. It's this sort of shallow representation. Sometimes then you might have your queer main character, so that's revolutionary, but then it's once again still a lot of the same stories, which are still important to tell, just like any stories, but we're always going to be wanting more and more and more. But then at the same time, it's like, oh, it's just, this little aside that, oh, by the way, I have two moms or whatever, because that's, life, and that's just as natural as somebody having, the regular mom and dad sort of thing. So we're always going to be wanting more and more nuance and more diversity.
So I guess this begs the question that do you as queer comics artists in various different ways feel pressure to tell certain kinds of stories, like these stories that will be good for young readers? Alice, I just read the book that you worked on, and maybe you can tell people who haven't read it about hockey and, the intersection there of Indigenous and queer identity, but also it's very much a hockey story. But it has a lesson, right? And at the end, there's kind of there's some notes and things, and there's I think a warning at the beginning that.
I love that you. I read
it over lunch.
Yeah, I was like, you're more refreshed on it.
I do my homework. But it occurs to me that that's going to have a really strong place in classrooms and in school libraries. And what the others are saying is that we need different kinds of stories. But maybe just tell us about that book a little bit and the kind of audiences that you think your team is looking for, and what that book will do.
So it's Between the Pipes is about a boy named Chase in high school, and he is also on the hockey team. I'm not a sports fan, so that the drawing hockey book, it was a very big challenge for me.
How did you do it? I mean, did you look at a lot of video, photographs?
I took a lot of photos of myself holding a stick. Yeah.
That's all my photo references.
Yeah,
Weird, awkward pictures of me. Chances are, if there's a picture in the book, it's a picture of me. And I just made it up.
Yeah, I didn't watch videos because I don't want. I looked at a lot of pictures though, and it's about him sort of, I guess, I'll say coming to terms or understanding like that he is sort of part of this queer community, as well as he is sort of encouraged by like Indigenous people in his life and elders as well. So I think I'll say, like, from what if we're gonna analyze, I would say it's important in the fact that it does show different ages of queer Indigenous people, as well as the community that they have, or as well as being inclusive, because there's at least two other characters that are queer within the story, which, like, I personally added more in my head. But yeah, it's very much about, for me, like, it is important that we are able to see, like, most of the characters are Indigenous. Most of the interactions between them are about, like, they're not necessarily, like, sometimes they're about, I'll say, specifically Indigenous practices, but a lot of it is just talking, right? It's just about being a Indigenous kid who, he only has his grandma to talk to about potentially being queer, and so he wants to have some sort of community that, he's able to understand from, because a lot of the time is you don't know what you could be unless you can either see it or, you've been told about it. So, like, it's very easy to not know, the word for what you are, right? And then if you are able to see it presented through other people or other forms, then it's, I would say, valuable. Is that good?
Yeah, that's great. I have more questions about hockey, but I'm going to leave that.
I don't like hockey.
Like, can you give a more like hyper-masculine world to the?
Oh yeah, okay. Man, I was like, yes, for sure. I like just for me. I do understand that it's a hyper-masculine sport. Just for me, I don't connect the two because it's just not on my brain. I'm not a hockey person. It was hard for me to draw hockey stuff. Yeah, I'm proud I did it. Yeah.
And Scott, do you want to talk about, because you also collaborate on Indigenous stories, and I know I've heard you talk before about the position you're in and the work that you do on that. So do you want to talk a little bit about being part of teams as well, the kind of representation that you build into the stories visually? You can pick anything to talk about. You have such a long back catalog.
I mean, like it's definitely a collaboration, and over the years, in particular with, say, somebody, an author like David Robertson, who I started working with 7 Generations, and 15 years later, we're still working on the superhero books now, and that sort of thing. He and I are very like-minded in terms of like how we want to tell stories. He has a very cinematic view, even though he has no art skills, but he still writes in a very visual kind of ways, camera angles, and sometimes we'll even suggest stuff. He's sort of loosened the reins to me just because of how we work and that sort of thing. But although there's another little aside, a very early incarnation of Reckoner, before it was going to be a Reckoner, like 13 or something years ago, and it was there was a lot of hockey in that one too. It was like yeah, hockey, yay. But then it got optioned for TV, which didn't go anywhere, and then it got right back into either novels and then wrapped up. And I mean, but there's a lot of collaboration. I feel like at this point, Dave and I definitely sort of go back and forth a little bit more. Like ultimately, because it's an Indigenous story and I'm a non-Indigenous person, there's only so far that I am comfortable inserting anything. With something in Reckoner, I feel like there's a lot more freedom because it's very much more fictional. But anything else, it's a lot. Even if it's historical fiction, there's not very much that I don't want to put too much of myself. There's just the talent of just storytelling and my art style and that sort of thing, but I don't want to put too much in. That being said, I have been seeing, in addition to the Indigenous representation, but there's more, starting to be like more LGBTQ representation. I love Brady from the Reckoner series, and the novel, I loved his character. He was such a good friend and just also had many days, great. And I think with the graphic novels, he gets a new boyfriend, unfortunately. In the novels, it follow the whole killing your gay thing, unfortunately, but then again, David killed a lot of people in the book, so, you know, maybe not focusing too much on that, but he's got a new boyfriend, plus Pam ends up being kind of non-binary, or there's a little slight error with the pronouns, that sort of thing, but we'll get that sorted out. But there's more representation there, or with a girl called Echo. There was a little bit more just in background characters and that sort of thing. So I'm seeing more, and I am very thrilled about between the pipes. I'm not thrilled about hockey or anything, but it's just a queer focused sort of story. So I was really glad to see something like that. I'd love to see more of it. Of course, I'd love to be involved in it, but hey, whatever. I can't pick all my battles. So.
One thing I noticed talking about a girl called Echo and also in Between the Pipes is a lot of the backgrounds, like the school hallway will have, you know, the Gay Straight Alliance Club posters, or the hockey stick has the rainbow tape on it. So there's ways in which the visuals are speaking, I think, quite loudly to queer kid readers as well, and saying, you know, this is what a school could look like. This is what the school looks like in this book. It's interesting to think about the way that visual narrative is being told in the background of the narrative.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about lettering, and I think we were talking about lettering in the previous session too. So, what does lettering contribute to the story? Tell us, for those of us who maybe don't pay enough attention to lettering.
So if you read comic books with words, I'm the one that typesets, and I'm the one that arranges the words in balloons, and I'm, you know, if the artist doesn't do it, I'm the one that draws out the sound effects or the captions and all that stuff. You know, it's typesetting. And what it contributes to a comic is just, well, you know, if you want to read a comic, it has to have lettering in it, but it has to be good. It's, you know, it's like graphic design, where the letter's job is to guide you to, you know, through the page with words, through the picture, you know, through words and all that stuff. And you have to be effective in doing that. You know, good lettering, or like lettering in general, makes or breaks a comic, like good art, because, you know, there's, I think a certain, like, sensitivity you have to put through when it comes to, you know, lettering different styles. Like, I've been really lucky that, you know, as much as I'm envious about the people who like letter predominantly like these or Marvel comics, they really just work. You know, it looks great. You know, it's a professional house style. But I'm so privileged and I'm so like lucky to work with different art styles. Like Alice, like their art for Between the Pipes. You know, like a letter's job is to also make sure that it blends in the art. It's not just on top of it. You know, you're not putting like a diamond circle, you know, it hasn't really been tweaked with Comic Sans on it, you know, black border right on top of Alice Arnold's art. You don't do that. You don't do that. So, you know, it enhances, it makes you immersed in the story because, yeah, like if there's anything that will take you out of reading something like a comic, it's lettering. And, you know, for example, in Between the Pipes, you know, I actually for the stroke, if you read the book, the balloon stroke, you know, it sort of has a certain texture. You know, I sort of drew, like I kind of tried to copy Alice's, line art style in like software, and I vectorized it, and I made sure it was a brush I would wrap around like Illustrator. And I also decided to like hand draw the sound effects because sometimes you just use the fonts, you know, blind bought like comicbookfonts.com, you know, Comic Craft, you know, you can just manipulate those typefaces in a comic. But here it's just like because of the art style and just it's just so unique, it's just so wonderful, and you wouldn't want to use like Zoinks, you know, CC to make like a hockey sound effect on an Alice RL book. You know, like I drew it in Photoshop, and you know, I sort of, you know, use different tools, you know, to make those happen. You know, yeah.
I love this. When people get passionate about what they do, it helps me understand as a reader. So I guess I want to ask a question that I think Sonia or someone asked in a previous panel, which is, and coming back to our panel topic, like why are comics a good form for telling LGBTQI plus stories, 2S? And why, I mean, you're all very passionate and committed to your form, but why, what would you say to someone else to convince them that comics are a great source for own voices stories of all kinds, but especially queer and trans ones? What can comics do, apart from great sound effects?
Yeah. I mean, comics is a visual form, and you know, you combine thought and image, you know, and like I feel like us as people, we're literally just a collection of, we're an image and we're like a collection of thoughts. And when you see a comic and you see someone who just happens to be, you know, gay, bisexual, trans, lesbian, you know, in a comic, it's a great reflection. It's the closest reflection that you could see before seeing an actual person and, you know, getting to know someone. And it's also, you know, for anyone who's isolated, you know, for any queer kid who's isolated, it's a way for them to sort of, you know, it might be a place to escape. It might be, you know, a place to feel solace in, you know, the pages of a book. If like outside the world, it just kind of sucks, you know. It's just these little mirrors, you know, little boxes, and you know, little bordered boxes, maybe borderless boxes, where you know you can see yourself, and when it's done right, when it's written right, when it's portrayed right, you know, it's also like the feelings. I think, you know, representation. You know, you can say representation, but I think sometimes it's just like you kind of like art really evokes different feelings, and when you're able to succeed in doing that in like a comic page, like it changes everything. And it doesn't have to be like, again, queer representation, but when it's like someone, like when it's a queer artist putting it down on the comic page, when they're, you know, when they're putting in the specific color, and they're putting in a specific like, you know, style of stroke or anything, when the letterer does, you know, like a specific like screaming to evoke maybe the pain or maybe like the joy or maybe, you know, just like, you know, day-to-day life of just what it's like to be queer. You know, I think that would be, it would really make someone realize, you know, like it would make someone think deep down, you know, what they might be, how they act around people, and like, you know, how they're perceived around everyone. And, you know, like it helps reflect, it helps us reflect. You know, not sure if it would convince someone, but I think just that sort of clarity, you know, or just the reflection is, I think, really helpful in doing that in a comic form.
was gonna say, like, other than something like, let's say, fan fiction, comics are really the largest amount of like queer representation in any medium. No, sure. No, I was like, video games are getting there. They're not bad. But compared to TV, movies, there's nothing that compares at this moment. And just the amount of different stories, right? You can find almost literally anything, sort of the vibe you're looking for with also what you want, right? And then also, like for me personally, if I am recommending comics, I am choosing it based on like what the person likes, right? Because there is a large variety of comics. I think just and I personally feel that it is somewhat difficult to get people to read comics just because it can be, I'll say, it can be intimidating to just start a comic. But even just doing like, I finally downloaded webtoons on my phone, right? And I'm like, I can do it now. And I've read so many comics now. So I think there's just, it's, being able to have that accessibility and then just finding what you want.
Okay, so more or less going to say something like that anyways, is the thing that graphic novels and comics can do is there is a reduced barrier, because with novels or text-heavy sort of stuff, if there's any reading challenges, then it can be hard to get through that. Completely different pace, that sort of thing, whereas the visuals of comics, you can still get a lot just through the visuals. And that can then also be a stepping stone to more in-depth reading, maybe getting into the novels, or just simply other books and comics and that sort of thing. And once again, it's just one more medium for that representation, Indigenous, queer, anything else like that. And also, like, comics are relatively easy to produce. I mean, very time-consuming and that sort of thing, but easy in the sense that it's easier than, say, film, where you have to get cast and you have equipment and everything else like that. And then the reduced barrier by not being completely text-heavy. The novel is also very easy, but it might be hard to get somebody's attention with just text. There's a lot more required investment by the reader to be able to get into it. Right? So many books that it took me 3 or 4 tries before it's like, oh, now I'm hooked. And I love the book, but it took me so many times to get into it, sort of thing. And how many books or other things have been quit on because it's like, nope, I can't get into fast enough. But this graphic novel, oh, yeah, I love the artwork. And yeah, you're studying stuff.
So I'll ask one more question, then we'll open it up. So we have about 10 minutes left. And I'm thinking about the access and the low barriers, like what comics can do. And I'm realizing that quite a lot of the queer memoirs I teach have a kind of shocking double page where there's a kiss. And I have to kind of tell my students, like with Alison Bechdel's Fun Home, don't leave this around if there's young people in your house because I will get complaints from other people. There's a double page where 2 women are having sex. And then I'm teaching M. Carroll's A Guest in the House, and there's a double page where there's 2 women kissing. And so I'm wondering, there is this moral panic around sexuality in comics and censorship. Maya Kobig's fantastic comics memoir, Genderqueer, is the most banned book in the US right now. And they actually did a comic about that for the Nib. But, so part of it is a double-edged sword, right? The accessibility, the visuality that can reach out to people who need to see it can also reach out to their enemies. And I'm wondering if there's a sense amongst queer comics artists of taking a risk by representing queer sexuality, especially, and whether, like with Alice, with your team, was there any kind of idea that would keep it fairly school-friendly? Or Scott, when you're working with David on the Reckoner, is the specter of censorship and criticism by, let's say, right-wing forces, is that ever part of your thinking, or are you just going to tell the stories you want to tell it?
Well, with the Reckoner, at least anyways, I'm going to say that I think the writers ultimately wanted to tell, and the drawing wanted to tell the stories that we wanted to tell. That being said, they are curating the book to be for a certain audience. So if they were going to create one that was for more adult, then I feel like I would do that, but with the purview. So yes, I think if you are going to do something that is a little bit more explicit, we'll say, then yes, they're going to have that risk. But I mean, this sort of ties in with the idea. There's more of these books in there, more accessible and more representation for younger people, so they can feel more comfortable, we're not alone at a younger age. But now that's also a target. But that's sort of like saying, oh, it's a animated cartoon, that's just for kids, but it's clearly not if you've ever seen something like Akira or Fritz the Cat or whatever, right? Like, the medium isn't, no medium is really designed just for kids, but of course that's what starts to happen. We start seeing so much of it. If you just see superhero books, it's like, oh, well, that's all that it is. If you see all these books for young people, oh, that's all there is, and it's not appropriate. This isn't appropriate. It's like, well, it might not be appropriate for kids, but it's not say it's not appropriate for an older audience, of course.
In between the pipes, there's definitely slurs in there. I don't know how they're censored.
Asterisks. I was going to ask.
I'm pretty sure if I was like, I'm okay, yeah. And I like for me as the artist, I don't feel like I personally didn't feel that I needed to comment on that. And I thought that I was more like, oh, well, the teachers or the school will be mad or whatever. Like, but and then I think about things like I read things like April Raintree when I was 14 or something. Like, there's a lot of like I read Watership Down when I was like 8. Like, there's you know there's things that I was exposed to that potentially were not age appropriate. But that is just sort of how it goes, and and then you ask the appropriate questions to the appropriate individual who hopefully is kind enough to like kindly explain these things to you, right? Like, not always the case, but like obviously like general censorship and that kind of thing. I think it's fine to have it. I think like the asterisk, very good idea, because it's important to see that these things are utilized, right? Even though it's sort of like, it is shocking to see, or it's just like, I don't like to see that word, right? It's just when you don't want to see things that have been used against you, but then you understand that, yeah, there's a point to this, right? This is something that's been used against you, and therefore, we're trying to teach people that, no, that's not really cool, kind of thing.
Kind of like for historical stuff.
Exactly.
Exactly. Or something like that.
Yeah, like there's a
historical context. Or
yeah, and it's just even just like they're supposed to be like teenagers, right? And teenagers are kind of a little foul mouthed, like. Yeah. And that's so I think it is reflective of what kids go through in school.
And the homophobia is part of the story.
Oh yeah, unfortunately, yeah, and that's like, and once again, it's not. I'm personally, if I read a story, I'm not necessarily interested about like the homophobia part of it. Like, if they're gonna be gay, we're just gonna be gay and happy and stuff. But like once again, it's important. It's important to be able to see this. It's important to be able to be like, no, that's not wrong. Or no, that's wrong. That's not cool, kind of situation. And or in kids even, that they know that this word is not necessarily a good word, right? And that just, it is harmful or it hurts people.
Yeah.
And just be like, like, oh, okay. Once again, I do think it's easier once you're able to see it, right? And just for people to be like understanding that, oh, okay, I hurt your feelings, I get it, oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on the demographic a book is made for, in regards to censorship. Like, like, for example, banning like the gender fluid graphic novel is very stupid, because it's supposed to teach, it's a positive thing for kids to learn. But when it comes to, obviously, when things get a little more mature and stuff, well, we're not marketing those things for kids anyway. So that's also where the problem lies, where they treat, like educational or just like these graphic novels that are meant for a certain young demographic as adult material. That's where the problem is. And, I don't know how we could stop it, because we would just be shaving ourselves down to fit a specific, very homophobic, very transphobic criteria. So the only thing we could do is just make what we want, you know, make something that really matters. Because if we make something that will appease the people who will censor it anyway, what's the point?
I think it comes back to Scott's point too, the idea that people think comics are all for kids.
Yeah.
But I know Jillian and Mariko Tamaki's book, This One Summer, was banned by some school boards for clearly having a queer kind of subtext. That's because school librarians weren't reading it before they were putting it in elementary schools, because it won an American Library Association award. So there was all this idea that it was a book for kids. So I think too, we need more attentive reading, right? And thinking about where books are being placed.
Whoa, media literacy, what?
We are basically out of time, but we started late. So if anyone has a question for the panelists, I think we should take it. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm gonna need you to drop the sauce on lesbian grandmas, please.
Okay. Look at my phone. Oh, because I don't remember, but there's definitely it's out there.
Yeah, I think we need a reading list after this.
Man, I read so much.
I got a great reading list from all the panels today, so yeah, we should, I think Prairie Comics Fest should have some kind of follow-up, like, recommended reads from all of the conversations. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, well then it leaves me to thank our panelists for sticking it out all day, coming to the final panel, and for sharing their work and their really insightful thoughts about this, their own work in the field in general. So thank you very much.
Thank you.